Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. How are you doing today, Brian?
I am doing pretty well. We're recording this on a Sunday morning, so I'm feeling good, feeling refreshed. How about you, Jeff?
Um, I could say I'm getting closer to being refreshed. Definitely loving the early morning pod. Definitely gets the blood flowing. But with the move and everything, everything's still in flux. But it's good to be in a new location and taking life in
Word,
this
that's
new
awesome.
location. So the topics that we have for today are the Lonzo Ball situation and the Bulls as a whole situation, uh, Jalen Brunson and his demands, and Miles Turner and his recent injury, Frank Vogel and his job, which is in jeopardy, and Ben Simmons to round up the pod today. Are you ready, Brian?
Yep, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So starting off, we want to discuss the recent news about Lonzo Ball having a meniscus tear, a slight tear in his knee, and it's going to impact him where he's going to sit out up to 6 to 8 weeks before he's evaluated, I believe. And numbers wise, it may not be the best season that we've seen of Lonzo, but impact wise, I think that this is the version of Lonzo that we wanted to see and the version that we knew he could become. Obviously, the stats still aren't there where it needs to be, but those comparisons that he used to garnish early in his career of a Jason Kidd-like player are starting to fulfill and starting to actually look real now because the guy's honestly been playing very well this year, and it's sad to see him go down with an injury like this at this moment. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, man, Lonzo Ball. It's looking at just even how many games he's played each season so far. It's kind of turning out like Lonzo Ball is just kind of an injury prone player, which is sad to say. And I mean, it's unfortunate like something like this has happened to him, or like that meniscus injury in his left knee. And but like you say, Lonzo Ball, like in terms of numbers, not his best season, but at the same time too, we got to realize Lonzo Ball isn't really the type of player where numbers are going to show his true value, because he does so many little things on the defensive end. He does all those little hockey passes where it really helps the team move the ball. And it's so unfortunate for the Bulls, who have been having a fantastic season, just riddled with injuries the entire time. Um, it's super sad to see. Hope for speedy recovery. Hope for them to be good by the playoff time. But and then also, yeah, I want to mention of like Lonzo Ball numbers aren't exactly the highest point, but man, his 3-point percentage of this year so far is pretty fantastic. He's shooting 30 or 42% on 7 attempts a game. And like from last year, like each year he keeps progressing his shooting percentage. And man, it's such a sad thing to see him go down like this.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people take a lot of appreciation for what he had to do to even change something as small as his shot over his career. You saw when he was in UCLA, he had an unorthodox shot where he would swing it across his body from left to right and take the shot. And that's something that he's completely gotten rid of through the help of shooting coaches. I know he always credits them for changing his shot. And, for to see, I think he's 5 seasons in now, to see that it's not even the same shot at all. Is kudos to him, his game, and what he's willing to do for his game to be amplified and better. So when a guy like this has injury problems or, cannot stay on the court for whatever reason, you feel bad because he he is one of those guys that's putting in the work constantly to be one of the best in the game at what he does or in his position.
Yeah. It's even, I don't know, I always have some admiration for players that that do the dirty work, which is defense of because we always talk about those that impact doesn't show up in the stat sheet. His impact in the stat sheet is his 2 steals, which is pretty fantastic across the league. But no one looks at oh yeah, 2 steals. Wow, this guy had a great defensive game. But man, it's it's sad to see a player that's been so well for the season that's been going so well for a team, um, and then even more. We got even more injuries for the Bulls. Jeff, do you want to go into this?
Yeah, so I believe it was on Friday, the Bulls and the Bucks matched up, and I was actually watching that game live as well too. And Lonzo Ball, I said Lonzo Ball. I mean Caruso had an open lane to the rim and comes in crashing in. Grayson Allen taking a very, very, what is the best word for this? Uncalculated or not really, yeah, uncalculated, not really thinking play with a very, very hard foul. But it went into being more than excessive than just a hard foul where he got ejected for that. But the residual effect of this now is that Caruso has fractured his wrist, and he also now is going to have surgery and be out up to 6 to 8 weeks before he's evaluated as well. So what are your feelings about that, Brian?
Ah man, yeah. It's so another thing. It's so sad for a player that just comes back from injury. He just came back from injury. He's back with his team. He's been a huge spark plug for them. And then now he also goes down. The whole Grayson Allen thing, it's I mean, everyone's going to talk about it of just he has a history of these things. This isn't the first time that he's done some dirty foul that's got someone injured. It's not, or even there. I actually kind of find it tough to watching it multiple times. I don't really think it's the dirtiest foul I've ever seen. It's, he's trying to make a play. Uh, and he's trying to stop him from getting the shot up, but he warranted getting ejected. He was not there. It was excessive contact. Even afterwards, he was trying to make it a hard foul, and the guy's in midair. And when you try to make it a hard foul and the guy's in midair like that, that's where it gets dangerous, and that's what we just saw. What do you think about this whole situation?
So where I differ on that, I agree. I think if you put someone else in that jersey and commit that same foul and everything, it is a hard foul, right? When it comes down to it, it's a hard foul. But there's things about where first you got to take in history of player. Second, you take in the fact that he showed no type of remorse. Like there was no signs of him seeing if Caruso was okay. When he literally went back to the bench, it was almost like a kid that knew what he did was wrong and just ran away, right? And he showed no type of remorse for that. So that kind of changed my opinion about it right away, because initially seeing it, you just say, oh, yeah, it's a hard foul. That's it. But slow it down, look at it, and then see the actions that follow, make you think, okay, I don't know if there was intent, but I do know that he clearly did not care about what he was doing there. And it's something that I've had issue with. And I know he wasn't a part of the team during this time too. But there's been times where you've seen the Bucks have embodied that. I've seen people, our players specifically, that were injured on a play, and the Bucks players either just wreak havoc and just do something that just didn't make sense sometimes. I'll take into account, I'm trying to remember what individual it was, but someone, I think, hurt their ankle, and Giannis just, decide, I'm going to push him. And you take into account the last year in the playoffs, I think it was a dirty play, but to play without regard for other players makes it look dirty, because we can't measure intent on players, right? There's that's why we have courts in this world, right? It's like even then you still can't measure intent, right? So same thing is with the play that happened in I believe it was the conference semifinals against the Nets when Giannis landed right underneath Kyrie. But, typically that call with landing under someone is if you're shooting. It's not usually applied when you're rebounding. So, sometimes you can have an inadvertent moment where you have your foot slide under someone and, something happens, you can't control that. But the level of not being remorseful at that moment as well was what brought that same feeling back up to me about this Grayson Allen play. And it just went into me, diving a little bit into NBA Twitter. And NBA Twitter was very, very upset with this play, was very, very upset with the likes of, the Bucks typically making plays like this. And like I said, not remorseful at all about how they went about it.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point about this is like a kind of a history thing, even just for the Bucks, because it's true. They play very hard, and they play very hard, which can lead to certain injuries in certain points. So like something like there, I wonder if Grayson Allen's like thought process is like, oh, I did nothing wrong, and it like no remorse, like I'll do it 100 times out of 100 times of I'm gonna not let this guy get an easy layup. Like that's my job to not let him get an easy layup. And I wonder, because like you're saying, his actions is like he just goes to the bench and like doesn't really care. It shows no remorse. Like I wonder if that's kind of like what he's thinking, versus what was it? Even like a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. I forget exactly who the player was, but I believe it was with Kyrie as well, where the player was diving for a ball and almost like took out like Kyrie's ankles while doing that. And I remember afterwards, like Kyrie was angry at it and it was like, "Oh, that's a dirty play." Meanwhile, the guy is like, "I'm out here hustling. I'm gonna do that play every time. I have no intention of hurting you. Like that's not what I want to do." Versus, it feels like with like Grayson Allen, it's like if you get hurt, like that's what it is. But I'm gonna hustle every single time. Like that, I'm gonna do my job to hustle and stop you from doing this. I don't know. That's just my thought process here.
Yeah, it's a very Drago from Rocky 4, I think it was.
Yeah.
Type of way of thinking and playing basketball. But that is what the rest of the team embodies,
Yeah.
like you see they're going to be tough on you. And granted, that's why they're one of the best defensive teams in the league, right?
Exactly.
But at the same time, all I can measure is if you're remorseful about the things that you do. And at times it shows that this team clearly, if they hurt someone, they don't care. And they're ready to run back on the other side of the court and get to work. I think another big thing that we saw from this is that Billy Donovan decided, I'm not going to shut my mouth about this, and openly said that he thought that play could have cost Caruso his career. And granted, I thought, like I said, first watching it, there's a lot of moving parts in this, right?
Yeah.
So the action of what he did is not as crazy. Like I said, it's a hard foul, but it's the impact of what happened right after is Caruso coming down. He's crashing down. He has no way to land. Obviously, he's going to use his hand. The fact that, like, by straight impact, sheer impact, fractured his wrist just showed you how fast he was crashing down. Mm-hmm. And he was very close to hitting his own head on the ground. Like that, I think that's where he's mentioned that and why he mentioned that. And he went on to say that he believed that it was also a very dangerous foul. You know, like you're not allowing for that player to land safely. And that really does, could impact someone's career if it's, very detrimental in the sense of their health, And at this moment, it already shows that it's something that has impact. It's going to impact Caruso for a number of weeks. And, another thing that I wanted to add to this too is you have players on his team sticking up for Grayson Allen. Obviously, that's the brotherhood of the NBA. They are always going to stick up for each other. But at the same time, I think that Middleton made some comments that just, he could have stayed away from saying anything because, we've seen Giannis hasn't said anything. We've seen a lot of other players on the team stay away from it. But Middleton went on to say that as he knows that Grayson Allen didn't intentionally try to hurt, he didn't intentionally try to hurt Caruso, but it was just a good hard foul is what he mentioned. He also went on to mention that, with that in mind, that his team, I'm looking to pull up the direct quote actually right now, so I could give you exactly what he said. But
it's hard to say like it's a good hard foul when the referees also look at this and go excessive contact, flagrant 2 foul. That's not a good hard foul.
Exactly. So the rest of the quote was he went for the ball. I don't think Grayson Allen is a dirty player. We're all disappointed seeing him ejected for that foul. And NBA Twitter could not take it after he said that. Like they could not take it because what I surmise is that's a bold-faced lie. We all know. First, you just said he's not a dirty player when he's been notoriously known for being a dirty player. And then you go on to say, you are disappointed that he got ejected after someone is now injured, and it's going to affect their whole pursuit of that number 1 spot in the East.
Yeah, there's a difference between like holding someone back from getting up the shot when they're still on the floor. But Alex Caruso is straight up in the air and like, does he make a play for the ball? Like sort of, but watching it in slow-mo, it's like he's putting some extra force to like get him off his balance there. Like there really is some like excessive force where it's extremely dangerous, and we just saw what just happened from what happens when you try to do something like that. It's a big difference if he's trying to make a play for the ball, trying to stop the shot, and he has his hand straight up in the air, he jumps straight up or something like that. Sure. But he's like swinging his arm down and like trying to really knock him off his balance to like not get a shot off. And that's where it's just like, it's a little tough. I don't know how he could actually defend that. I mean, other than him being his teammate, but like, I'm sure if Chris Middleton was on another team or Grayson Allen was on another team, I don't think he would have that same thought process.
I think that, like I said, he could have just refrained from saying anything.
Yeah.
He just said we support Grayson Allen. Even if he just said that we didn't think it was warranted
Yeah.
for him to be ejected, that would have been even different. But for him to, go into trying to dissect the play as something else is, it's egg in the face. Like you can't say that when we all clearly can see that there was some I wouldn't say, once again, I don't know intent, but it did look malicious. It did look like a malicious play. It looked like he wanted to stop any type of momentum that could have swung to the Bulls.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, but like stopping someone in midair, that's why I just keep mentioning, like, it's very dangerous to do something like that. And yeah, he has the reputation, we all know. And it's like, isn't even necessarily a bad thing. Like, I can understand trying to get any competitive edge you can against somebody else and doing things like a little more slight or anything like that. I don't know. But yeah, it's crazy, crazy. Hopefully, a speedy recovery for Alex Caruso. It's sad that it's happened, but hopefully he's good 100% by the time of playoffs and all that.
Hopefully, best wishes. So our next topic that we wanted to get into is it's a duo topic because one gives way to the other. Is the Jalen Brunson news, and Jalen Brunson recently weighing out the market thinks that he is at a value of a similar contract as the Joe Harris's, the Gary Trent's, and the Norman Powell's of the world, and an 80 mil, 4 years, 5 years deal, where he's shown his impact on the Mavericks the last couple of years, warranted to ask for money because it's almost that time. I think he's been on the team for 4 years, and I think this the start of I believe the end of his restricted free agency. But we'll see what type of money he really garnishes in the open market. What do you think, Brian?
So it's actually pretty funny. So since I believe Jalen Brunson was a second round pick, that's where like it's leading to him, like, this whole contract is a complete mess of what the Mavericks actually signed them to, because yeah, after the season, Jalen Brunson is actually an unrestricted free agent, so he's able to go anywhere he wants and everything. And like you're saying, he wants 80 mil for 4 years, and of course, quick math, 20 mil a year. Is he gonna get it? I think he'd actually be pretty close. I think he'd be pretty close. I can see some team giving him that. Does he deserve it? I kind of think so. He's a very good player. He is a little bit older as a player as well, because the reason why he went second round too is because he was a little bit older coming out of college and stayed there a little bit longer. I can totally see. Well, the Mavs kind of. I wonder what the Mavs are going to do, because it's either like you're probably going to lose this guy in unrestricted free agency. So do you trade him right now? He's probably one of your best players other than Luka right now as well. So it makes it pretty tough. But there's also not a ton of value of trading an unrestricted free agent on their last season. So this is where like it puts the Mavs in a really tough position. I know personally of like the Knicks have a ton of interest in Jalen Brunson. They needed a point guard all the time. I still don't know if Jalen Brunson's like the top echelon of like starting point guards or so. He's been playing extremely well, that 1-2 role with Luka and all. Man, it's gonna be crazy to see what happens here with Jalen Brunson, because he's been playing. This is probably one of his. I think this is his best year so far. Yeah, he's averaging 16 points. He has 5 assists. His 3-point percentage dropped a little bit to 33%, but still, the man is balling. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I think that he's coming off one of his this is the start of his best career, his best season in his career. He's really figuring out the game. It looks like the game's slowing down for him, and that he's making the right decisions when he's out there on the court. The guy averages a little bit under 2 turnovers a game, so he's making the right decisions is what I think on the court. But I think the money that he wants, if he wants it, he will not be a member of the Dallas Mavericks because I think that cripples them. Currently, you still have KP's contract on the books. You have Luka's contract on the books now. If you lock in Jalen Brunson, you start to have a similar situation to what's happening on the Hawks, where if you ensure that you're going to lock up this much guys, it kind of handicaps you. And that's how the league has made it for salary caps, where if you divvy that much money to a good chunk of players, the talent pool that you get to choose from is severely lessened. And you got to keep that in mind if you want to lock up Jalen Brunson. If they get rid of Jalen Brunson, if they let Jalen Brunson walk, that also is a problem too, because he has been a good, refreshing burst to what Luka brings on the playmaking side of things, and gives them a secondary playmaker in the sense where Luka could sit on the bench for a little bit, catch his breath, and we could get Jalen Brunson in and play his game. And then another thing that I appreciate about his game is that you see that his game does not change because Luka's on the court.
Yeah.
Or on the court or off the court. So that's the perfect type of point guard you need to have around Luka. But is it worth locking him in at $20 million on your cap for the next 4 or 5 years? I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's exactly what you're saying, where it's just not enough money for them to do it. And it's not necessarily a position of like pure pain for them, just because they already have Luka. Just start running the offense even more through Luka and all this stuff. They need more help other than Jalen Brunson. And like you're saying, what are their big contracts? Luka, giant contract, deserved. Porzingis, giant contract. Okay. Tim Hardaway Jr., giant contract. Now you're gonna give Tim Hardaway Jr. is also like around 20 mil. Now you're gonna give Jalen Brunson as well. Like, where's the rest of your team? Where's all this? You guys really don't have a lot of assets. Tim Hardaway Jr. is not a easily tradable contract. Porzingis is not easily tradable contract. No one really wants him. It's they're just hamstringing themselves, which can lead to like a potential, Luka asking out or something like that, because he's going to realize this team doesn't have enough talent eventually. So my thoughts are like, they're probably going to trade him. I think they have to kind of trade Jalen Brunson, which is sad because he's been one of their better players. But that's where it's just like, where's the value now in Jalen Brunson? Because he's going to be unrestricted free agent. So you could just, instead of trading first round picks or a really good player or anything like that, just wait till the offseason if you really want this player. That's tough.
I agree. That gives way into my thinking about, like I said, he fits perfectly for Luka. But honestly, I think a lot of people fit in perfectly with Luka. So if you could find a cheaper alternative to the point guard, you do it, and you just try to make it and piece it together to speak to the value that Luka brings. You can't have a scoring first point guard on the team where Luka's there, right? Because it's the same dynamic of like LeBron. He is going to be a primary ball handler, so you need to have someone that can do that if needed, if asked. But he will defer to making the right decisions on the court first over his shot. And That's why he's so invaluable on that team. But at that price point, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's I wonder what they're gonna do. It's definitely one of the more exciting storylines to watch throughout the NBA. Um, Especially the Mavs, who just have been playing really well recently. Um, yeah. Do you want to move on to Miles Turner?
So yeah, that's where I was going to tie it in together. Is one of the proposed trades that you hear is the Jalen Brunson for Miles Turner trade, and now there's a fork in the road in this situation where Miles Turner is now has a stress reaction to his foot. Never heard that in my life before that. So I'm going to do a little bit more research and
Yeah.
figure out what exactly that means. But he is in the process of getting a second option, but it's going to sideline him beyond the trade deadline. And yes, just to tie it in too, because he's a part of the Pacers as well. You're seeing Sabonis also dealing with injury issues at the same time. And it just seems like the Pacers are snake bitten right now because the two guys that had the best value to move at the trade deadline both are injured at the trade deadline. And how do you think that's going to impact what return they get, Brian?
I wonder. So, one, I don't think it's gonna affect Sabonis's value as much as Miles Turner because with Miles Turner, just looking at like even the last few seasons, he's missed a substantial chunk of games. So like last season, he's only played 47 games, and the season before that, he played 62. But like he's had some careers where are some games and throughout his seasons of like 60 games in a season, 65 in a season. And it's just like it's makes it tough, especially when your big men are having feet problems. This is the worst thing you can see happen. And it's sad because he's having a very fantastic year. He wants a bigger role. I've listened to um I've listened to some like Pacers podcasters before that like really follow the team and like their kind of thought process is like the Pacers actually aren't holding Miles Turner back. Like he will have one game where he'll play fantastic and have like 30 points and all this stuff, and then the next game he's just not taking shots. And it's not like they just wouldn't pass to him or anything like that. Like he just has up and down games. So they don't necessarily think that he's ready for a bigger role. It's I think if anything, this could like stop Miles Turner or like from actually being traded by the deadline because I assume the Pacers are still gonna want like a decent amount for his return or for trading him. And I don't know if they're gonna get it anymore. Cause like what the conversations before were also like OG Ananobi for like Miles Turner was a potential. And like at first, a healthy Miles Turner, I guess it kind of makes sense. But now you're not gonna trade OG anymore for injured Miles Turner. It's yeah, it's a mess. What do you think?
Yeah, no, we talked about it earlier a couple weeks ago about how Miles Turner values himself, right?
Yeah.
And sees himself as someone that should be a big part of whatever team that he lands on, right? But I'm starting to now with the foot injuries and the reoccurring injuries, starting to think of it as a player that's comparable that I think he could model himself in and be serviceable to a championship team playing the same way is finding a way to accept your role such as Brook Lopez did.
Yeah.
And Brook Lopez went from being one of the top guys on his team when he was on the Nets. But over time, like his game just didn't translate to being that for unforeseen reasons such as the league changing and how we value centers. But not only just that, also similar injury issues such as the foot. Brook Lopez has had a notorious problem with foot injuries. So, when he was moved to the Lakers, you saw it took him some time to adjust to not being the first option. And then also, by the time that he got to the Bucks, he realized I'm going to be relegated as a role player, but I'm going to make my minutes, every minute that I have, impactful. And that's what he does. And if he needs to have a game, much like PJ Tucker said this on the Old Man and the Three podcast when they spoke about that finals run, is when they needed Brook Lopez for one game to turn into Brook Lopez of the Brooklyn Nets, he could do that for one game. Yeah. Because he mentioned that after game, I think it was game 5, Giannis got hurt. Game 6, game 4, Giannis got hurt. Game 5, they needed Brook Lopez to have a game like he was on the Brooklyn Nets, and he was able to deliver that. And that's exactly where I see Miles Turner right now, is if he does things to preserve himself throughout the season, throughout the playoffs, when needed, they can ask on him to have a game like that and be so impactful for their team, the potential team that he might go on. But do I think it happens? I don't think it happens either anymore because of that now.
Yeah, it's I like that because I can also see that for Miles Turner of maybe a game or two or so every once in a while he's gonna turn it up and be able to go off like we've been seeing him do this year, but it's not going to be a consistent thing. I personally don't believe it will be, just because like you're saying, unless you're one of the top 2-3 centers, unless you're Joel Embiid, unless you're Jokic, like it's so hard to stand out as a center. And thinking about it, the games where Miles Turner stands out, what happens? He gets hot from shooting 3. Versus like Embiid and Jokic, those guys, they're dominating the paint the entire time, and yet they're shooting threes, they're doing all this stuff. But Miles Turner is like, he goes 7 for 8 from shooting from 3, which is fantastic, and every team would love to have that. But it does seem more comparable to a Brook Lopez, who that's pretty much what he does when he's on the Bucks and all that. So yeah, please.
I'm sorry, but the gap between, like you said, a Jokic and Joel Embiid and the rest of the league is the biggest gap ever. Yeah. Like, if you compare it through, I know we're in a positionless NBA now, right? But you look at wings, you look at guards, the gap talent isn't so big. It isn't so big, but when you relegate it to centers or big men, as classified now, just big men, you see the gap is huge, because guys that used to be, would have been considered big men, are now classified as guards or even wings at this point. So the gap is just too huge. That's why I don't think he understands where his real value is, because it just doesn't make sense in this current NBA.
I'm sure it's actually kind of concerning for certain teams as well, because you don't want to trade for a guy that doesn't really understand his true value. So he's going to come to your new team wanting a bigger role when you really see him as maybe a spot up 3 shooting center. And it's like, that's not what he sees himself as, and he wants to do more. But like, I'm sure that's what's kind of concerning for teams beforehand, because a center that could shoot threes is extremely valuable to any team. But is that gonna translate well for what Miles Turner sees himself as? I don't know. Now the injury just drops his value even more. Man, Pacers, that is literally the most like unlucky thing that could happen just right before the trade deadline, and he's going to be out still afterwards.
It's ridiculous. It sucks, but it's a part of the NBA. I think I mentioned something yesterday about that is where all the teams are dealing with injuries
Yep.
and protocols, and you can't weigh it more for one team or the other because everyone's going through it. So
That's true. Very true.
sucks, but it's the truth of where we're at right now,
Yeah.
at least with the league. All
Do you
right,
want to?
so yeah, heading into our next topic is actually about Frank Vogel. And actually, you know what? I think it's time for me to drop a little news because I just got a ping about it. Is apparently Anthony Davis is planning on making a return this Tuesday against the Miami Heat. So we'll say that. We'll add that into this whole Frank
Yeah.
Vogel job in jeopardy situation going on right now. So Vogel is now being weighed on a day-to-day basis. His evaluation of how to handle the team and what to do with the team. He has gotten questions from higher up on even how to handle certain players, notably the benching of Russell Westbrook a few weeks back against the Pacers in a game that they eventually still lost. And, they're sitting at 500 at this point in the season. And it's becoming very, very alarming that the Lakers are playing at this level. But do I think it's Frank Vogel's fault? I don't know if I want to say that as of right now. What I can say to you right now is that in the 2 years and a half now, that Frank Vogel has been the coach of the Lakers. The Lakers are, even though this is a terrible season, the Lakers are 1-16 and 69. That's an impressive record as a coach, But obviously, I know they're looking for more. They think that there may be other options out there. I've heard rumblings about Kurt Rambis possibly coming in and taking the helm. I know Brian has had his history with Kurt Rambis. I don't know. He's basically, whenever you have a bad coaching situation, the Band-Aid that they put on top type of guy. So what do you feel about the whole Frank Vogel situation right now?
So my thought process is like, I don't think it's the coach's fault. I don't think it's Frank Vogel's fault. But whenever a team starts underperforming, the easiest solution is get rid of the coach. And I don't see that as a solution for this team. Frank Vogel was handed a terribly constructed team. Frank Vogel was handed a flawed team this year. They're not performing to their level. The coach themselves cannot make Russell Westbrook play better. He can't. That's not his job. I mean, he can motivate him as much as possible. He can set him up in situations to help him perform better. At the end of the day, is not the coach's job to play. Like, I'm seeing this now with like even the Knicks, and like a lot of Knicks fans are actually going crazy after Tom Thibodeau of like, fire Thibodeau. He's doing X wrong. He's doing this wrong. And it's like the players are playing terrible. It doesn't matter who's the coach of this team. It's terrible. So back to the Frank Vogel. I mean, look at him. I just looking at like some of his records in the past. Frank Vogel in 2017 to 2018 with the Orlando Magic, terrible team there. 25 and 57. That was the terrible season that they had. 25 wins, 57 losses. In 2019, where he's the head coach of the Lakers when they won the championship in the bubble year and all that, their season was 52 and 19. So 52 wins, 19 losses. It's a huge difference in just the talent that the person has. And it's not necessarily his fault. And then even the following season, all right, after they win the championship, which was so I'm talking about last year now, they went 42 and 30. Not the greatest record and everything. We saw what happened to them in the play and stuff and all that. But also look at look at the roster he had at the time. A lot of LeBron James injury. LeBron was injured for a lot of last season. Anthony Davis was also injured for a lot of last season. Are you going to blame that on Frank Vogel? Now, you just mentioned Anthony Davis has been injured for a majority of this season already too. Are you going to blame this on Frank Vogel? Like, changing the coach, especially to Kurt Rambis. I mean, I've seen Kurt Rambis as a head coach before. It is not pretty. I've seen him coach a bad team. So maybe if he coaches a better team, maybe he can do a better job. I don't have a lot of faith in there. Yeah, that's a complete mess. It should not be the coach's fault. I wouldn't be surprised if he does get fired though, and then they're gonna see nothing actually changes. It's very rare that you see something like what happened with the Hawks of now you get Nate McMillan to be the head coach, and now Nate McMillan brings them to the conference finals. But meanwhile, look at the following season now. The Hawks are also having a pretty terrible year and struggling. Nate McMillan's still the coach. Is it his fault? Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. No, I agree 100% because you've seen just leading off of the Kurt Rambis first. You've seen that Kurt Rambis, when given an opportunity, that he's not the most sensational coach. I know he has had his stints with the Knicks, with the Lakers, even with the Timberwolves. I think was his first time having a full-time like head coaching job, and it hasn't translated to anything good. The only good season that Kurt Rambis had was, and I believe it's a season they came off firing their head coach before Phil Jackson was placed in, or either actually I think Phil Jackson was on that 99 team. So I think he came in. There may have been, I don't know the full backstory of why he coached 37 games that season, but he went 24-13. That was his best stint as a head coach. He is a subpar coach. He is a sub 500 coach, and even saying that is an understatement for what that record is actually. It's 72 and 173. So he has not been the right fix that everyone needs when you place him in there. So I just feel that they should try to see how they could work with this Frank Vogel situation. But also, I will say too, I agree with what you were saying about injury has impacted a lot of what's going on for the Lakers. The poorly constructed team, like you mentioned, is definitely the highest thing on the list. And it leads me to go back to someone that I think I've spoke about in the past on this podcast. And to this day, it's still it's almost asinine that people go on to talk about the Lakers so much and about Frank Vogel, but turn a blind eye to the guy that constructed it, Rob Pelinka. Rob Pelinka is the reason why you have a team that, like, let's be honest. When we think of unmotivated pieces not fixing teams, you don't think of a veteran team doing that. You usually think of a veteran team at some point figuring it out. Granted, we still have enough time in the season for them to figure it out. But once you start seeing a trend where it's like every game, it starts to look like they're doing the same thing. They'll have 4 games up, 4-game winning streak, and then they'll have 1-5 of their last 5 games, as they recently just did. And that's not winning basketball. That's not the mentality of a winning basketball team. So I don't think that even if you bring in Anthony Davis, that changes anything, because we saw when Anthony Davis was with the team as well, he also did not look good, So yeah, there's really no answer to it as of this season. It is construction. It is Rob Pelinka that should be getting this blame, and he is the guy that should be considered to being fired rather than Frank Vogel, who's put in a really bad situation, heading into this season.
Yeah, I mean that's what it really is. Just like Frank Vogel's in a bad situation, and like I understand when people want to fire their head coaches, and like if they lose players in the locker room, like if they lose the locker room, then like at that point it's kind of tough. But at the end of the day, winning solves everything. If the Lakers just start winning, Frank Vogel's job is going to be safe. It's going to be all this stuff. And I mean, he's trying all these different things. Westbrook has been pretty bad this season. For the most part, he's been pretty atrocious, even though, he's still putting up a lot of numbers, but it's not really productive. And he benched Westbrook at the end of the game because he's trying something new. He wants to do something else. He wants to see a different look. And, even that might receive some backlash. And like, yeah, it's sad. Rob Pelinka should be the guy everyone's looking at. And even so, look at the giant names and all the big names that they're getting to be to join the team. And then they're trying to do the same thing kind of with their coach. Like, look at all the coaches out there. They're trying to bring Kurt Rambis, and Kurt Rambis, like you mentioned, has not had a good history of being a head coach. There's so many good like assistant coaches and all this stuff that I honestly give one of these guys a shot. I would actually be happier with that versus giving Kurt Rambis, who has a terrible history.
And I don't want to go all Kyrie Irving on this one right here, but I think that unlike any other sport, specifically the closest league to contrast like the differences is the NFL, where in the NFL, the coach that you have is very, very impactful for how you're going to win or like the type of team you're going to be, because it's a lot about scheme, but in the NBA, it's very different because it is a very player-centric motivation of how they play, right? Yeah. If LeBron's not on the court, not necessarily going to play through their 3 or 4 guy, and he's bringing the ball up. He's not. It would have been a different scenario. Same way, you have AD as a 4, but in the NFL, if you had an option like that, and you knew the players would maximize his value being in a bigger role, you would just do it. You would not have as much of a problem with doing that as what the Lakers are having. With AD doesn't want to play that 5 role because he doesn't want to bang bodies with the big 5s in the league. And he is now. He's not AD that walked into the league a skinny, scrawny boy. Like he's one of the big boys now, and he still doesn't want to bang with the big boys. Is what makes it so interesting about his situation, and him always saying that he doesn't want to do this. But it gives way into what I was saying, is that you cannot blame. There's certain things that you can't blame a coach for, and this is right up the alleyway as one of those things that you can't blame a coach for, because construction of team, not thinking it out, where you have 3 top-heavy players and a poorly constructed bench, and you're very top-heavy because of it, because now you can't even benefit. You can't get any benefits from the guys that are your role players.
Yeah, it's set up to fail, which is sad to see. I'm sure the next couple of weeks we're probably going to be talking about this more when he is fired, but we'll see. I want to go on to the last main topic we have. I have some weekly roundup stuff that we can do as well.
And then that heads into the Ben Simmons and his recent news. Obviously, Ben Simmons will always have news. But the first one that I want to land on is he has said or he has made it aware through reports that if he is not traded by February 10th, he has all of the belief that he is going to be sitting out the rest of the season. What do you think about that, Brian?
Ah, man, I don't know. I'm thinking he's trying to bluff right now. I'm thinking he's trying to bluff. I don't think that's true. I mean, he's already given up like an insane amount of money, and I don't think he's gonna give up even more for no reason, just to not play. I mean, hey, Ben Simmons has plenty of money already, but still, to pass up what the rest of his contract is going to be another 10, 15 mil or so. I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna do it. I think it's a huge bluff. I think he really wants to scare the Philly into doing this. What do you think about the situation?
It's a bluff. It's a pretty good bluff, right? Because I always like to think of, as people there's this old adage that if someone tells you who they are, believe them, right? And Ben Simmons told you, I'm the type of guy that will sit out a season. And what is he doing? He's sitting out. He has sat out.
That's true.
This season. He has not flinched once about this. There has not been any reports that he's flinched about it. And we've talked about how the Kyrie and his situation, there's like a stark difference in what's going on, right? So you heard rumblings that Kyrie would come back at some point, right? There's not been one rumor that Ben Simmons would be willing to come back to the court.
Yeah.
So the guy has completely checked himself out, which is ridiculous because I don't think that that's the best way of handling this. And how do you, as a rival GM that's looking to bring in a guy like this, take that? Like, once again, the same thing comes to play. If a person tells you who they are, believe them, right? Like, as a GM, you know what the best that Ben Simmons could bring you, right?
Yep.
But you also now know the bad that Ben Simmons will bring you. And Ben Simmons has shortly shown that if it doesn't go my way, if it's not where I want it to be, I will greatly impact how this team looks. And
oh my gosh. I mean, I'm trying to like think about it. It's like, will he? Would he actually do? Is this a bluff? Like, I feel like the meeting that I'm blanking on his agent's name now.
Rich Paul.
Yes, Rich Paul. The meeting that Rich Paul, Ben Simmons, and then Daryl Morey and the Sixers people, like the meeting that they had when they got lunch and everything. I feel like that was probably started up by like Rich Paul and them be like, hey, let's talk about the situation because like I'm losing a lot of money, but like let's just talk about it. Like let's see if there's anything here. I still don't know. Like it sounds crazy, but like you're saying, I'm sure right now this is a huge red flag. And it's like, all right, it just the Philly wants to add Tobias Harris to any of these conversations. Tobias Harris is at the moment severely overpaid for the production that he brings. So you're trying to add the giant contract that Tobias Harris has with the mess of Ben Simmons and all that. Yeah, he's a good player, but man, that ego and all that stuff. Do you want that in your locker room? Do you want that as your star player? I don't know. And it's like, who's going to give up all their assets for that and to pay Tobias Harris all that money? And like there was that conversation of there's a report of the Hawks were willing to trade John Collins, Cam Reddish, and a first round pick for Ben Simmons. And then Philly starts to try to add Tobias Harris into the deal, and then the conversation just completely ended. Like this is what's happening around the league. What do you think about this?
It goes back to what we were saying, even I think in preseason and the beginning of the season, is that they're grossly overvaluing what they think a package for Ben Simmons should look like.
Yeah.
And now you get a deal or a package that works, right? Collins, you bring back John Collins and you bring back
There's Cam Reddish.
Cam Reddish, and then a pick as well for a disgruntled player. I'm taking that. I'm running with that because actually, I think John Collins fits better with Embiid than Ben Simmons does. So I would run with that deal, right? For you to be so arrogant, and I know this is stemming from Daryl Morey, and it's another reason why I just don't like him as a front office guy, is he just thinks that it has to go his way. And I know that there was probably ways where this was coming towards the end of talks, and it could have been potentially finalized, and he was like, well, now let's throw in Tobias Harris.
Yeah.
And that turned off the Hawks, and the Hawks probably walked away from there once he did that. He's notorious for overvaluing what he thinks he has and underplaying that other people could be smarter than him. Yeah. And he's been doing that since he was on the Rockets when, they're backdooring and I think we still are in a part of Harden's prime, but in the beginning of Harden's prime, he would make these ridiculous claims about how great his teams were. And granted, he did construct a really good team in 2018-19. I'm going to say that. PJ Tucker team with Chris Paul, that was a really good team.
It was.
But he did very, very much overvalue a lot of what he thought James Harden was. I do think that James Harden was at his best during that time, but the way how he talks about him, the way he talked about the team, just you don't want a general manager that is like that on your team, because it's going to be hard for other teams to work with him, and you want a guy that can work with other teams. Right now, you're seeing a guy that can't work with other teams, and because of that, it's becoming a joke. Like I think I talked about it briefly in the last podcast. Is Kyle Kuzma was asked, not even asked. Kyle Kuzma decided to go to Twitter and joke about how packaging Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris is literally $80 million. Who's picking up that money?
Yeah.
Who is picking up that money for a guy that needs a new scenario, and another guy that also needs a new scenario, but is severely affecting his image at the same time? So what do? There's nothing you can really do. You can't package them both together. You gotta essentially make it. Honestly, we probably might see the biggest 5-way trade or something. Yeah. For this to work. It's the only way I think it could work, because no one's picking up both of them.
That is true. There's definitely going to be like a huge 5-way trade or something like that. That's the only way that the Sixers are going to get what they want, because what it feels like to me is kind of like if the Pacers were like, oh, look, Miles Turner, everyone wants him, right? People like his talent, right? And then Miles Turner gets hurt. And then he's still like, hey, that value that you're telling me for Miles Turner that you're going to give me, let's say you're going to give me $100 when he's healthy. Now that he's injured, still $100. Hey, he's a good player. Come on. He could be for your team. Oh, good culture fit and all this stuff. And it's like, no, his value is lower now. Stop trying to get $100 for him. And that's not how it works. And as well, it just seems like they're being extremely hard to work with I saw there's a report that said the 76ers think that Matisse Thybulle is untouchable in trade talks. And it's like, all right, you're trying to give all your, it's like the Lakers right now. You're trying to give all your junk out. And it's like, hey, look at these guys. They're available. Let's do trades. Meanwhile, it's like, no one wants these guys. No, the guy that people want, Matisse Thybulle. Okay, maybe you throw him here in this trade. Now we have a conversation. Now you can get rid of Ben Simmons. Now you can get rid of Tobias Harris. These are two players you don't want anymore. And it's like, you can't get rid of two players you don't want and get something you love back. It's not how it
Yeah.
works.
It's just crazy how the league has changed in that way too. It's like we valued so when it comes down to it, I still think Matisse is a role player, right?
Yeah, he is.
But we value role players to the point where we're saying they're untouchable. Is a weird thing in the league because that's the reason why you have players like that is so you could leverage them for trades that could potentially change
Exactly.
the construction of a team, right? That's why you see teams like I think honestly probably the best scenario at this right now in the present moment to talk about that is like the Nets is with the young talent, the role players they had, they turn it into something. They turn it into value in some way. And that's what you're supposed to do. Yes, you may decide to cultivate those players, keep those players, but if a better scenario is presented, you jump on it. And I don't think any fan would be against that.
Exactly.
You may think that he's untouchable, but I think that if he helps move a trade to get rid of this guy because he is a cancer at this point, you do it. Do it.
Yeah, it's such a mess. It's such a mess. But it's such an entertaining mess that we can't stop looking at it.
It's rubbernecking. It's the NBA's version of rubbernecking.
Yeah.
You see the crash, you're trying to stop looking and just keep on driving and go to where you need to be. But it's just, oh my God, it's so grotesque. You gotta look.
Oh man, I'm sure next week we're gonna have another Ben Simmons segment, and it's gonna keep going on. But we'll see. Do you want to move on to the weekly roundup?
Yes.
All right. So, a couple things. I can get your thoughts on like I want to get pretty quickly, but one, we did have a 3-way trade that we haven't actually. Did we talk about the Bol situation last time? Yeah, we did, right?
I believe we did. Yeah,
we did. Never mind. Ignore that. So first one, KD. We didn't talk about this. KD is injured now, and he's expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks with the medial collateral ligament sprain on his left knee. Jeff, my question for you though is, does this affect the MVP race? Because KD was number one.
It's completely over now. It's funny to see the season is almost mirroring what happened last year. You had a departure for Kyrie. You had the only thing that's different is James Harden came in looking not like James Harden, but he's turning back into that James Harden that we all know, right? Not only just that, we also are seeing KD was in the running for a big situation, and he an MVP situation, but an injury impacted it, and now Kyrie and Harden had to carry the team on a West Coast road trip and see if we could right this ship. So that's the interesting part first. It's more telling to me that I think that the Nets are going to be so careful with KD now. And it sucks because that's not what KD wants. And KD always wants to go right back into the game, just like how he was beforehand. But the Nets, we've all seen what the Nets do. If they have a guy that has an injury, they're going to caution on the safer side, and that's going to affect it. It has definitely affected the MVP race for him, and I don't think he's going to win it because of that this year.
Man, it's so sad to see KD get injured. He's playing so good. It's definitely after we had that conversation where I said Steph was number one. A couple more games happened, and I was like, all right, KD's number one. Like it was that close to me, and he's been that good, and it's sad to see this happen. Next, there was the Lakers. They offered for Jeremy Grant, Taylor Horton Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, and a 2027 first round pick, and it was denied. What do you think about that?
So honestly, at first I thought this is the dumbest trade package ever. Why would you send this? Why do you want this? For I mean, like, if I was the Pistons, I wouldn't okay it either. But then I started walking it back. It's not really as much of the fact that that Taylor Horn Tucker or Kendrick Nunn's in that package. It's more of that pick.
Yeah.
But let's use the same analogy you said about the dollar. You don't trade a $10 for $1.02, right? Like, you would never do that. So why would you do that in this case? And luckily, the Pistons wised up and didn't do that. But like I said, if that pick is not protected, I think I would have rethought it a little bit. But I'm sure that it was a protected pick.
Yeah.
But it's goes back to what I said before earlier in the season 2, is that the Lakers are that guy that always talks about the girls that he could have had or used to have or
Yeah.
wants to have.
That's so funny. There's also another report that said that the Pistons are seeking for Jeremy Grant. All they want, 2 first round picks or 1 first round pick and a young talented player. So they definitely don't see that Taylor Horton Tucker is a young talented player like the Lakers do. Next there was the Rockets. Surprisingly, the Rockets are open to trade John Wall for Westbrook. What do you think about that?
Okay, the dumbest thing ever. Like I just said, the dumbest thing was one previous. This is the dumbest thing ever. This, when I saw that, I was like, well, maybe it's because there's a different GM, and the new GM is just probably thinking maybe we could buy him out. But then I was like, first, why didn't you just do that with John Wall and buy him out and let him be free and make his decision first? Second, went back and realized Raphael Stone was the same guy that traded Westbrook a year ago. So why would his mind change that much? I don't know. Seems like fluff, like a fluff report.
Yeah.
I really don't think that they're really that open into that. And it just doesn't make sense. Where's he gonna fit? They would have to buy him out.
Yeah, it is. It makes no sense. Like exactly what you're saying. Raphael Stone traded Westbrook for John Wall. And now, 2 years later, he's gonna trade John Wall for Westbrook? Just it makes no sense at all. Uh do you think though that John Wall fits better with the Lakers?
I do think so. I do think based off of how he plays, but it is going to be comparable. I don't think he lifts him. I don't think he's going to move the needle.
Yeah.
I just think that he helps with spacing a little bit better because he can shoot a little bit better. But the issue was never that Westbrook can shoot.
Yeah.
The issue is Westbrook is a high usage player, and John Wall is going to come in being a high usage player as well. And that's just not going to be beneficial for guys like AD or LeBron if you're playing them. And now you can't use that same moniker that they thought they were going to say about Westbrook. If I hear one person say this, if the trade goes down, I'm going to have to pull hairs, is that John Wall is going to be there when LeBron and AD is injured. I literally will pull hairs in my hair.
John Wall adding a third injury prone person now. I mean, LeBron's been getting injured a lot recently. Anthony Davis is always injured. And then John Wall as well. Like that's tough. Next there was about the Nets. Paul Millsap and the Nets have mutually agreed to part ways and are going to now begin to look for trades. What do you think, Jeff?
I'm sorry. I wanted one last
Yeah.
thing
Go
to the
for it.
last topic. I think that I was trying to look it up before the pod, and I was trying to think about it right now too. I still have no proof that if that trade does go down, that there's ever been a time in NBA history where a player's been traded for the same player twice.
Yeah,
So we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. But
exactly.
looking into the Paul Millsap thing, uh, no, I think it's the right decision. I this is what I love about the Nets the most is they're accommodating for their players.
Mhm.
Player can be disgruntled for this long, and we haven't heard one word about it. Obviously, Paul Millsap is not happy with his role
Yep.
currently, but Paul Millsap should be upset at himself too because he came into the season out of shape and lethargic and just did not fit right away, right? Um, you know, it's okay when you're James Harden and you do that, right? But it's not okay when you're Paul Millsap and you're trying to find a role on this team and you do that.
Yeah.
So it sucks that it has to go this way, but I hope they can facilitate something that works for him. It looks like I think they're going to lean more to a buyout for him to get off the team. But if there is any packages for a trade, I would love to see what they entertain and what they think about in that case. But let's be honest, what team's really looking for a Paul Millsap right
Yeah.
now?
Not a lot. Not a lot. So I'm interested to see what happens. What happens there? I actually forgot to add this for the Jeremy Grant stuff, but Jeremy Grant. There's a report by Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report that Jeremy Grant is most likely to be traded to the Wizards. Now, as well, there's a report that said Denny Advia is getting a ton of interest from teams, and I'm wondering, Jeff, what do you think that trade can look like, and what do you think about the fit?
So Advia would go to the Wizards. I mean, go to the Pistons
Pistons, yeah.
in that case. I think that looks good for him. That drops, in my mind, that drops Cade into the point guard role.
Mhm.
Danny could finally get that starting position. I think it fits. It works. It's almost like the project with Bol Bol, what they thought they were going to do with Bol Bol
Yeah.
if they got him, but now they're going to have Donnie Avia to do that. And honestly, I think that at this moment is a better project to work with than Ball Ball presently. So
Yeah. No, I
it would
agree.
be a good fit.
I agree. I like it. I like it. So I wonder how that's gonna work out. We'll definitely see going forward. Um Also as well, the Celtics are exploring trades for Marcus Smart, who they just signed this offseason to an extension. It was a 4-year, 77 mil contract extension, which ends up being 19 mil a year. What do you think about that?
Well, I hate teams that work off of emotion, right? Or feed into fans' emotions, right? Any executive that makes decisions purely on what fans think is an executive that should not be a part of that team, right? And it seemed like for years, Celtics have embodied that.
Mhm.
Marcus Smart should have been gone years in my mind.
Yeah.
He was a great value, and this is where I think people forget is that you don't trade a person because they're bad. You trade a person because they have so much value that can add so much more pieces to what you're trying to work with. And he was the type of player at the time that even 2 years ago, um, you trade him and you get something substantial that could help the team. And I think that there's going to be a few teams that are in the running. Um, Watch out for a team like the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
I'm scared of a team like that finding him, because that makes them even more of a stealth wolf and on the defensive side of things,
Yeah.
because they have a lot of guys that could play some pretty good defense, and I think he fits that culture perfectly if he ever made his way there. And I know he may look comparable to Kyle Lowry, but I think this version of Marcus Smart should be okay with coming off the bench, and to have a 1-2 punch of literally almost the same player, kind of even look the same, would be pretty scary.
Yeah. Wow. That would, I guess, it kind of tying into what you just said. This is the last thing I'm going to bring up, because there's a lot of other little things, but I don't think I really want to get into it now. But the last thing you talked about, the Heat. The Heat are open to trading Duncan Robinson, who they just signed to a 5-year, $90 million contract, $18 million a year. It comes out to. What do you think about the Heat trying to trade Duncan Robinson?
It's crazy because, there was a lot of jokes early in the season when he was struggling, about the reason why he's playing like this. And they said his podcast is the reason. I think it's called The Long Three or something of that sorts. They think that's the reason why his game has regressed. But I really like his game.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to give up on him right now. I think only reason why I would say move him is because he does feel like that one guy that doesn't fit
Yeah.
like the Heat culture 100%, but he's still a really good player. And hey, you shot yourself in the foot on the Miami Heat with giving him that money. I know the market decides where the value is and how much you're going to give. But at that point, if you really didn't think 6 months ago that he would have been the guy to give this money, why walk it back 6 months later? That's how I feel about it.
It's interesting. I mean, just looking at the Celtics and the Heat, like you're saying, of like those contracts do line up pretty nicely. 19 mil a year, 18 mil a year. I wonder if there's any conversations going on there. Yeah, that is the weekly roundup. Jeff, do you have anything you want to say before we close out?
Don't always trust this is a cautionary tale right here, but don't always trust the preseason basketball championship odds, as we now see the Lakers are slumping on those odds. But for some reason, they're still in the top 5 of odds of team to win the championship. So always be mindful of this. And I think that's all I have for the pod for the rest of this episode.
That's crazy that they're still like in the top 5 for odds there, when after the season that they're having, about to fire their head coach. Man, anyone that's putting that bet nowadays, it's a little crazy. Hopefully none of the listeners right now are thinking about putting that bet, because Lakers, I'm sorry, not this year, maybe next. Man, another fun one. I'm happy we're able to get this one in this week. Follow everyone, of course, like I always say. Follow the Twitter. Jeff is killing it out there. Links are in the description. This was a lot of fun, and this was episode 17.
Peace.